Thomas and the Fat Controller's Engines. Bird Strike. I know what a Jubilee is, announced Henry. It's an engine called Bahamas. I met him at Crewe. Isn't it a sort of party? Asked Percy. Thomas and I took some scouts to one once. That was a jamboree, put in Thomas with a chuckle. Was it? Said Percy. Sorry. Gordon smiled. Actually, it's a train, he said knowingly. Flying Scotsman told me. The Silver Jubilee used to run from London in the old days. But we're not London, objected Henry. And if it's a train, why do we need it? James continued. We don't, interrupted a well-known voice. Our Jubilee is a golden one, because in 1995 it is 50 years since stories about us began to be in books. I thought it would be a good idea to celebrate. It is a party, squeaked Percy excitedly. The Fat Controller laughed. Sort of, Percy, he agreed. I haven't settled the details yet, but you will all know about it in plenty of time. Engines were excited. Will there be a special train? Gordon asked the Fat Controller. Can I pull it, please, sir? Sorry, Gordon, said the Fat Controller. There will be a special train, but I can't spare you, I'm afraid. Anyway, haven't you forgotten how you had coal and water problems on the other railway? Gordon had. You remember Pip and Emma, don't you, Gordon? The Fat Controller went on. I have asked them to be my special train for the guests from London. Gordon puffed away. Near Henry's tunnel, the main line passed through woodlands, and the high branches of the trees were full of birds' nests. Often, great flocks of birds circled above the railway, and sometimes Gordon had noticed them feeding in their fields nearby. Today, birds were much closer to the railway than usual. Bop, bop, whistled Gordon as he approached a farm crossing. Startled, the birds rose together in a thick black cloud. They swooped across the line in front of the train. One bird, larger than the others, had been perched on a gatepost beside the line. It flew so close to Gordon that its wings almost brushed its nose. As it did so, there was a bump, and Gordon felt his brakes come on. Why are we stopping? Gordon asked his driver. Perhaps someone has pulled the emergency brake, said the driver. Don't worry, the guard will come and tell us in a minute. But the guard had no idea what was wrong. There must be a leak in the brake pipe, said the fireman. He inspected the pipe from one end of the train to the other, but he could find nothing wrong. I can't understand it, said the driver, scratching his head. There's no leak anywhere, yet the brakes are hard on. It was just when those birds flew across, said Gordon. One nearly hit me, and there was a bump. Just a minute, interrupted the fireman. He looked quickly at Gordon's front brake pipe. There you are, he said triumphantly. The fireman laughed. The bird knocked the real one out of your brake pipe, he explained. Look! Well, I'm blessed, said the driver. I've never heard of a bird strike on a steam train before. A crow did it on the Great Western in 1915, chuckled the fireman. I read about it only last week. Gordon was soon on his way again. The other engines laughed. Poor old Gordon, they chuckled to each other. Fancy being stopped by a bird. That's nothing to crow about, is it? Edward and the Cabbages. Edward's branch line runs from the station at the bottom of Gordon's Hill. It goes along the coast to a port where the twin tank engines Bill and Ben work. Edward and Boko run this line, and Donald and Douglas, the Scottish twins, help them when things are busy. They all work happily together. Their trains don't need to run fast, but it is not often that they keep the big engines waiting. Usually it is the big engines who are late. One morning James was delayed at the big station, and Edward had to wait for him. When at last he could start, he wanted to hurry up to make for lost time. Steady, Edward, cautioned his driver. I know we're late, but an accident will make us even later. Edward slowed, but as he approached the next station, his wheels jolted badly at some points. When Edward stopped at the platform, the fireman checked him all over. Everything seemed to be in order. Edward set off again. He was beginning to gain speed when he began to feel funny. My front's all wobbly, he complained. Scarcely had he said it than the fireman saw something bump along the line beside them. Jiminy Christmas, look at that, he exclaimed. Quickly the driver crossed the cab, and both watched in horror as a round metal object rolled along beside them like a hoop. After a while it hit a stone and bounced away into a field. Very carefully the driver applied the brakes, and Edward came safely to a halt. He was glad because his front now felt very loose. The driver and fireman climbed down and came to look at his wheels. There was no doubt what the trouble was. One of them wasn't there. "One of your bogie wheels has broken off," said the driver. "Thank goodness we were on a straight track and not going too fast. There could have been a nasty accident." Later, the Fat Controller's telephone rang. He listened in astonishment. "What's that you say? An engine's wheels in your cabbages? I quite agree, it must have been a great surprise. One of Edward's, you think? Is he all right? Thank you. I'll see to it at once." The Fat Controller put the telephone down and mopped his face with a red and white spotted handkerchief. "Bless my soul," he said to himself. "It's a good thing Edward didn't end up in the cabbages himself." Next day, Boko helped Edward to the works. Edward's wheel, broken off when the axle joined it but otherwise undamaged, travelled in his tender. The Fat Controller came to see him. "You had a lucky escape, Edward," he said, "but there's no harm done. I just hope we can get you mended before the Golden Jubilee celebrations. Oh, and by the way, the farmer says that if your driver wants cabbages in future, there are much safer ways of cutting them." Rabbits. "Rabbits?" said the driver. "What do you mean, rabbits?" asked Thomas. His driver laughed and pointed ahead. Beside the line near the airfield station was a post with a white disc on top. It had a red circle round it and a black number 10 painted on it. "Rabbits have been building burrows under the line," the driver explained. "They've made the ground unsafe, so the Fat Controller has had to bring in a speed limit here until the embankment can be strengthened." "But it's the steepest part of the line," protested Thomas. "How shall I get up the hill when Annie and Clarabelle are full on market day if I can't increase my speed at the bottom?" "You'll manage," said his fireman, "but Percy's trains are often heavier than ours. He won't like it much." Percy didn't. One day he stuck halfway up. Daisy had to wait at the station at the top while Percy's train was divided and brought up in 2 sections. "The sooner the Fat Controller does something about those rabbits, the better," all the engines agreed. Then they heard the work was to start. While repairs were being done, Thomas was to run to the station at the top of the hill. Bertie would then carry the passengers to the airfield station, and Daisy would take them to the junction. The day before the line closed, Thomas was taking Annie and Clarabelle down the hill when he felt his wheels quiver under him. "Help!" exclaimed Thomas. Suddenly the left-hand rail tilted, there was a crunch, and his wheels settled on the ballast. Luckily, Thomas stopped moving before Annie and Clarabelle came off the rails too. The guard went back to the station to telephone for help. Percy was shunting when the call came through. "Can't take those trucks to the harbour now that the line is blocked," said the station master. "Please take some workmen, bring Annie and Clarabelle home, and then help Thomas." Thomas was glad when Percy arrived. While Percy took the passengers back to the station, the workmen unloaded their gear and prepared the site. "The ground's unsafe for a crane, even if we had one," they said, "and we can't just pull you out, because that will only damage more of the line. We shall lift you on jacks, Thomas, so that we can slide rails underneath your wheels. Then Percy can pull you back on to the firm rails. We hope," they added. "How long will that take?" asked Thomas. The foreman shrugged. "Who knows?" he said. 2 hours, maybe 3. Slowly, with a jack at each corner of his frame, they lifted Thomas until they could slide lengths of rail laid on their side under his wheels. Then very gently he was lowered onto the rails. A strong cable was fixed to his coupling, and the other end was fastened to Percy. The Fat Controller had come to watch. "Are you ready? Heave!" he called to Percy. Carefully, Percy took up the strain. The cable tightened. Percy pulled again. The cable stretched and held. Very slowly, Thomas moved backwards, his wheels running in the grooves in the side of his rails. Then with a jolt, first one pair of wheels, then another, and at last the third came safely back onto the firm part of the railway. The men unhitched the cable, and Percy was coupled properly to Thomas. "Thank you, Percy," said Thomas gratefully, and Percy pulled him back home. Golden Jubilee. Back in the autumn, a spider had found a warm corner underneath the signal box of the junction. She had woven a web, pointed at one end and shaped like a funnel, and for a while she lived very well on what she had caught in it. Now it was spring, and the spider had moved on. She knew nothing about the preparations for the Golden Jubilee. "It's going to be a disaster," remarked Henry gloomily. "Important people, a special train, and nothing for them to see." "Ugh, ye old misery," said Donald. "Look on the bright side, there's a week to go yet." "I'm sure it will be all right," put in Daisy. She had been shy about living in the big shed at first, but was getting used to it now. "Of course it will," agreed Duck. "Have you ever known the Fat Controller's plans to go wrong?" "No," admitted James. "I've never known that." The other engines agreed. "Except, Henry, there's always a first time," he muttered darkly. By the time Jubilee Day arrived, Edward's wheel and Thomas's branch line were both mended. The Fat Controller told Edward he was to run ahead of the special train to make sure that the line was clear. "Does that mean?" he asked excitedly. "Wait and see," smiled the Fat Controller. Crowds began to gather at the big station. There was to be a red carpet, speeches, and a special luncheon for the visitors. "Last time we had a red carpet the Queen came," remarked Gordon. As the special train drew to a halt, Emma grinned happily at Edward. "Got your 4 lamps arranged?" she asked. "Off you go then, we'll follow in a few minutes." At the junction, a breeze blew into the room beneath the signal box. It wafted the old spider's web between 2 electrical contacts. At once, everything in the signal box stopped working. Signals went to danger. Points could not be moved. "Now what?" exclaimed the signalman. "There's a royal train due in 5 minutes." Edward stopped outside the signal box. Thomas, Percy, Toby and Mavis were already waiting. "The electrics are dead," the signalman told Edward's driver. "We shall have to flag you all through, but it will take time. You must go first, then the royal." Carefully, men with flags sent the trains on their way. Edward went first with a letter for the Fat Controller telling him what had happened. Pip and Emma went next. Finally, Thomas and the branch line engines were followed through. At the big station, the crowd was now enormous. The Fat Controller looked impatiently at his watch. Gordon, Henry and James had got the best places at the platform. "We shall see everything from here," said James happily. "If there's anything to see," grumbled Henry. Just then they heard a whistle. "That's Edward," said Gordon. "He's had a wasted journey, poor engine." We know Gordon was wrong, don't we? Pip and Emma soon drew in, and onto the red carpet stepped a royal personage. "I apologise for the delay, sir," said the Fat Controller, and he explained what had gone wrong. Then he introduced the royal visitor to each of the engines. "I heard about you all after the Queen came here many years ago," he told them. "I am delighted to meet you for myself." The engines whistled loud and long. The royal personage grinned and covered his ears. "The Queen was right," he told the Fat Controller. "Your railway and your engines are a credit to you." New little engine. Speed killer. "I hate dawdling like this," growled Rusty. "I get hot and uncomfortable." "Sorry, old chap," replied his driver. "We can't go any faster, or the weed killer won't spread properly." Rusty knew this, but he still itched to go quicker. His train that morning was a flat truck with a large tank on it. A pipe hung across the line behind the truck's buffers, and when the man in charge turned a tap, liquid sprayed onto the track through holes in the pipe. The weed-killing train was used only once a year, but that was once too often for Rusty. He had hoped that Fred, the other diesel, would pull the train today, but Fred was ill. "So he says," muttered Rusty darkly to himself. It was a holiday weekend. The Finn Controller had expected plenty of visitors, but he was surprised at the number who came. It was Rheneas's turn to take the first train, and he happily pulled the empty coaches to the station. So many people were on the platform that Rheneas could hardly see it. "Phew," he puffed. "How are all this lot going to get on the train?" "Will you go back for another carriage, please?" asked the Finn Controller. "I'm arranging an extra train later in the day." The time spent fetching the carriage made Rheneas late. He hated being late, but he knew that today it wasn't his fault. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he panted, trying to make up for lost time. They did well until they reached the middle station, where they had to stop. Rusty and his weed-killing train were waiting in the loop for them. "Nipped all those weeds in the bed, have you?" called Rheneas as the engines passed each other. Beyond the middle station, The line rises steeply for a short way so that it can cross a stream. The engines like to be able to get a run at this hill, especially when they have a heavy train. Today, Rheneas had to pass very carefully, some hedge cutters working at the foot of the hill. This meant that he couldn't get a proper run at it. He struggled hard, but soon his wheels began to slip. Halfway up, he slivered to a halt. "My wheels won't grip," he complained. The fireman got down. "The rails feel greasy," he said. "It must be Rusty's weed killer, and the extra coach doesn't help either." "Bother that Rusty," said Rheneas. "It's not weed killer he's using, it's speed killer." "Never mind," comforted his driver. "We'll go back to the bottom and put plenty of sand on the rails. That should do it." The guard told the passengers what was planned, and Rheneas gently backed his train to where the hedge cutters were working. Then they paused so that Rheneas could gather his breath. "Peep, peep," he whistled bravely. "Here goes." As they moved forward, the fireman turned on the sandpipes. "I can do it! I can do it!" Rheneas snorted. Slowly, very slowly, Rheneas reached the stream and crossed it. "I will do it! I will do it! I've done it!" Rheneas panted as the coaches crept after him across the bridge. "Well done, Rheneas," said his driver. "Now let's try to make up for lost time." They did their best, but the passengers had only a little while to admire the lake at the top station. They didn't mind, they said. They had enjoyed the brave way in which Rheneas had got them up the hill. Sir Handel's plan. "Who does that Peter Sam think he is?" grumbled Sir Handel. "He goes gallivanting off to Wales, and when our new engine isn't ready, he's brought back. We can manage without him." "We're short-engined until the new one is ready," said Skarloey. "It's sensible to have him back." "Huh," snorted Sir Handel rudely. "If he's too puffed up in his smoke box, I know what I shall do." When the Finn controller told Peter Sam to rest after his journey, Sir Handel was not pleased. "What's the good of coming home just to laze about all day?" Sir Handel grunted. He bumped his coaches crossly. Near the shed, he thought he saw Peter Sam grinning at him. "Right," he muttered, "that's it." His wheels hit a rough rail joint. There was a crack and a clatter, and his driver stopped him quickly. "That's your day done," he said. "Your fire bars have collapsed, and your fire has fallen out." Sir Handel chuckled to himself. His plan was working well. Rusty was the only engine available quickly. He took Sir Handel's train, and the Finn controller came to see Peter Sam. "Sorry to spoil your rest," he said, "but I'm afraid you'll have to take Sir Handel's next train." Some of Sir Handel's fire was rescued and put into Peter Sam's firebox. As soon as Sir Handel could move, he pushed Sir Handel onto the shed. Sir Handel didn't help at all. He just smirked to himself in the darkness. "That'll teach 'em," he thought. Days passed, but no one came to mend Sir Handel. Visitors longed to see Peter Sam now that he was back, and everyone else was very busy. "Oh dear," thought Sir Handel sadly, "I didn't bargain for this." He grew cold, and his paint became dull. The cleaners were much too busy making sure the working engines looked smart to worry about Sir Handel. He heard the men working on the new engine, but they didn't come to see him. They had no time either. One day the sound of cheering came from the workshop. "They must have finished the new engine," Sir Handel muttered miserably. "I wish I could see him." Just then the door at the back of the shed opened, and Sir Handel heard footsteps. It was the Finn controller. "Hello," he said. "Why are you looking so fed up?" "I am sorry, sir," said Sir Handel. "Whatever for?" asked the Finn controller. "I broke my fire bars on purpose, sir. I wanted to pay Peter Sam back." The Finn controller paused. "I see," he said. He quickly rethought what he had been going to say. "Well, Sir Handel," he said sternly, "thank you for owning up. If you promise to behave yourself, you shall be mended." "Oh yes, sir, I will, sir." "Very well," said the Finn controller gravely. Later that day, Sir Handel was given a new set of fire bars. No one ever told him that the special saw which he always used had only been delivered that morning. Dirty water. "They clean engines very well on the Talyllyn Railway," remarked Peter Sam to Cathy and Lizzie. Lizzie was polishing his whistle, and Cathy was cleaning the round windows in front of his cab. Cathy jumped down. "If that means you think we don't do it so well here," she said indignantly, "I'm going home this minute." Peter Sam smiled. The girl's parents worked on the Talyllyn Railway, and now they were on holiday in the island of Sodor and had come to see him. I was thinking of when I was ill, Peter Sam said. I took some cleaning then, remember? Tell us again, cried the girls. Quickly, Kathy sat on one buffer while Lizzie balanced herself on the other. Peter Sam took a deep breath. They have funny water on the Talyllyn, he began. What's that got to do with it? Demanded Kathy. Shh, reproved her sister. He won't tell us if you keep interrupting. I wasn't. Peter Sam yawned loudly. Have you two finished? He asked. Sorry, Peter Sam, apologised Kathy. I'll be quiet, I promise. Peter Sam paused. As I was saying, he went on, they have funny water on the Talyllyn. The men have to put something special into the water tank at the shed to make the water taste nice. Peter Sam smiled to himself. I was feeling quite well, he remembered, until I had my drink. But that day the water tasted awful. I told the driver how horrible it was, but he didn't seem worried. I took my coaches to the station, and the fireman let water into my boiler. Then I really began to have boiler ache. I feel sick, I said. Do the best you can, said my driver. We'll have a look at you at the end of the trip. But I never got that far. The green flag waved and the driver opened the regulator. I went a few inches and then whoosh! A column of filthy white water sprayed out of my funnel. Peter Sam shuddered. This awful water splashed all over me, he went on. It was lucky there weren't any visitors nearby. Ugh! And there I was, covered in horrible white sludge. Peter Sam shuddered again and closed his eyes. Driver tried to start me again, but the same thing happened. Luckily, Skarloey's twin, Talyllyn, was at the station, and he took my train. All I wanted to do was go back to the shed for a rest, but I wasn't allowed to. Why? Asked Lizzie. Peter Sam paused. They said that the visitors had come to see me, and would be disappointed if I wasn't there. So I was put onto the spare line, and everyone was told I was ill. But you soon got well again, didn't you? Said Kathy. Oh yes, replied Peter Sam. I was cleaned inside and out, and that was much better. They said someone had used too much of whatever it was they put in the water tank. They do it differently now. That's right, put in Lizzie. Dad told me you have to take a pill. Not a pill, objected her sister. It's some white stuff that the fireman puts into our tank when we have a drink, said Peter Sam. Much better. It took ages to clean off the muck that came out of my funnel. And that, he added sternly, is all I meant when I said that they clean engines well on the Talyllyn. Yes, Peter Sam, giggled the girls. Of course it is. I named this engine. The men had been working on the new engine for a long time. What's his name? The other engines kept asking. We don't know. It's a secret, was always the reply. Everyone just calls him Number 7. At last Peter Sam could contain himself no longer. He asked the Fin Controller. The Fin Controller smiled. Wouldn't you like to know? He teased. I do. What is it? Came a chorus of voices. But I'm not telling. You'll have to wait until the naming party. Ivo Hugh, the railway's chief engineer, was going to do the naming. Even he didn't know the engine's name. But Mr. Hugh, you must know, protested Skarloey. I'm afraid not, laughed Mr. Hugh. The name won't be painted until the last minute. It must be a place, or a person, said Sir Handel. To match us, he added. I think it's a place, decided Rheneas. But why is it a secret? The engines didn't know. But Rheneas's ideas was, they thought, the best answer. On the great day, a special train was to pick up the Fin Controller, his guests, and Mr. Hugh, and bring them to the bottom station for the ceremony. Skarloey, as the oldest engine, was going to pull it. The day was sunny. Kathy and Lizzie came early to the shed. First they cleaned Skarloey, and then they polished Peter Sam. Skarloey whistled cheerfully as he went up the line, and by then all the other engines looked as smart as he did. Skarloey passed the big house where the Fin Controller lived, and went as far as the middle station. There he ran round the train and pulled it back downhill. He stopped at the big house, and when the Fin Controller and his guests were on the train, he stopped again near the cottage where Mr. Hugh lived. Skarloey had just restarted when, with a squealing noise, something dashed past his front wheels. He stopped quickly. "What on earth?" demanded the fireman, jumping from the cab. In the long grass beside the line lay a large mother pig, and frisking around her were 7 pink piglets. Clearly Skarloey could go no further until they were safely caught. But they didn't want to be caught. "Oh dear," fretted Skarloey, "we're going to be late for the party, I know we are." The Thing Controller, Mr. Hugh, and even some of the guests joined in the pig chase, until at last all the animals had been captured and put carefully back into the field. At the bottom station a large crowd had gathered. All the engines except Skarloey were there, and number 7, with his name covered, simmered quietly. The minutes ticked slowly by. The manager looked at his watch. "Something must be wrong," Rheneas whispered to Duke. "Skarloey should be here by now." "Perhaps the Thing Controller wasn't ready," suggested Duncan, but was firmly hushed by the others. At last they heard a whistle in the distance. A little later Skarloey puffed thankfully into the station. "I'm sorry we're late," Mr. Hugh said, "but we've been chasing pigs," and he told them all about it. "However," he went on, "I'm here to name an engine. I don't know what it's called yet, so I shall have to read it to you. I therefore name this engine—" He pulled away the curtain. "Bless my soul! No, not that. It's Ivo Hugh." He turned to the Thing Controller. "I am honoured, sir. Thank you," he said, and all the little engines whistled loudly in acclamation. Thomas and Victoria. Overloaded. Toby was worried. So many workmen were needed at the quarry that Henrietta wasn't able to carry them all. Bertie the bus did his best to help, but he couldn't get closer than the quarry gate. "We need another coach to take the men all the way inside," Toby complained. One morning Bertie didn't feel well, and Henrietta was all on her own. More and more workmen climbed into her. "Help!" Henrietta exclaimed. "I shan't be able to move." "We can't either," grumbled the workman. "We're too squashed together." Henrietta had a balcony at each end, and soon even those were packed. She was fuller than ever before. Toby had a hard job starting. "Come on, come on, come on!" Toby fussed impatiently, his wheels slipping on the damp rails. People in the street stared as the train struggled past. Toby rang his bell cheerfully, but Henrietta wasn't so happy. Suddenly a car came out of a side street in front of them. Toby's driver put the brakes on at once. The train stopped quickly, and some of the workmen were pushed against the railing of Henrietta's front balcony. It bent, but luckily, it didn't break. A policeman passing on a bicycle stopped and made a note on his notepad. "Oh dear," Henrietta said to herself, "that means trouble, I think." She was right. The next day an inspector visited the quarry manager. "There is a bylaw, sir," he said, "which says that passengers should not be carried on the end of balconies of railway carriages." "I'm sorry, Inspector," the manager said. "It doesn't usually happen, but the bus couldn't run today." "Please make sure it doesn't happen again," said the inspector sternly. The quarry manager telephoned the Fat Controller to see if he could help. The Fat Controller wasn't hopeful, and the quarry manager went home to tea, shaking his head sadly. A few days later, Thomas stopped at the station by the river. As they waited, he heard a buzzing noise from behind a thick hedge that grew near the platform. Suddenly there was a rustling and a loud crash. A man's head appeared above the hedge. He had a saw in his hands. "It's nice to see the railway once more," he said cheerfully. "It's been like a jungle in here." Later, Thomas stopped there again. "Hello," said a shaky voice. Thomas was puzzled, but his driver had heard it too. He looked over the hedge and saw a very old, very broken-down railway coach. "What's your name?" asked the driver. "Victoria," replied the coach shyly. "Are you Thomas's driver?" But before he could answer, the guard's whistle blew and they had to go. At the top station, Toby told Thomas about the workmen. "I really need another coach," he said sadly. "But we've just found one," said Thomas excitedly. "She's in an orchard near the river, and she's old and lonely. She's got no wheels and her roof leaks like a sieve," interrupted Thomas's driver. "Don't even think about it." But Thomas did think about it, and asked the Fat Controller. The Fat Controller listened and made some arrangements, and then telephoned the quarry manager. "Good morning, Toby and Henrietta," the manager greeted them the next day. "It's going to be all right," he went on. "The Fat Controller says don't worry about another coach, because he has something up his sleeve." Avalanche. The Fat Controller had left Boko in charge of the branch line, while Edward went to the works to be mended. Edward needed to be fit before the summer visitors came. After a week he was growing bored, but then a newcomer arrived. She was a wooden coach, and Edward thought there was something familiar about her. That evening he heard a quiet, timid voice. "Excuse me," it said, "you're Edward, aren't you?" "That's right," he smiled. "Haven't I seen you somewhere before?" "Perhaps," replied the coach. "There were lots of us built for the Furness Railway." "That's your old line, so Thomas's driver says." "That's right," smiled Edward. "What's your name?" "Victoria," said the coach. "When I was too old to work, I was made into a summer house in an orchard. Now a kind gentleman with a top hat says that I can be mended and work on the railway again." "That would be the Fat Controller," said Edward. "Did he say where you would work?" "There'd be plenty for you to do on my line," said Edward hopefully. Victoria hesitated. "I think the Fat Controller knew," she said, "but he didn't say." "Where did you work in the old days?" asked Edward. "My friend Helena and I worked on a branch line to a station called Lakeside," Victoria said. "There was a big lake with steamers on it. Windmere it was called. Albert was our engine. He was old but very gentlemanly and polite." She broke off, chuckling. "Except once," Victoria explained. "It was winter and very cold. Even the lake was beginning to freeze over, and that didn't happen often." "I don't suppose you had many passengers of the steamer then?" put in Edward. "You'd be surprised," Victoria said. "For some it was the easiest way of getting from the town on the other side of the lake. Anyhow, on this winter's day the snow wasn't too bad at the junction, so we were all right when we set out. As we got near the hills the snow grew thicker. We reached a place called VIII, where there were 2 tunnels, one at each station. Albert didn't care much for snow. Silly soft stuff, he called it. Thomas used to say that too," smiled Edward. "The steamer was late that day. Ice in the water, they said, and that made us late too. Albert was hurrying because when people got off the steamer they had to catch other trains at our junction." Victoria paused. She chuckled to herself before she went on. Albert had been boasting about how good he was with the snow. "Well, we soon got back to Heatherwaite, and Albert stopped with his buffers right at the mouth of the tunnel. The guard's whistle sounded. Albert didn't waste any time. He set off with a tremendous blast of steam, but the steam blew an enormous lump of snow off the tunnel mouth. It poured down and landed with a thump on his cab. Albert's driver quickly put the brakes on. The train stopped and then a lot more snow came down on Helena and me. She was almost completely buried and half of me was too. Albert couldn't move an inch. He wanted to, but he didn't dare, in case he brought more snow down. Passengers weren't hurt, but it was the next morning before the men dug us out. I've never been so cold. Albert never boasted about snow again, though." "I wonder why," chuckled Edward. Wheels on wheels. The work needed to make Victoria as good as new took a long time. Summer came with a long, hot, dry spell. There was no rain at all for many weeks. The sun shone from a clear blue sky, and the engines grew hotter and hotter. Sometimes Daisy noticed creatures coiled up beside the railway, enjoying the sunshine. Usually they took no notice as she passed, but now and then they would slither away to hide beneath the dry grass. "How do they move?" wondered Daisy. "They've got no legs." "Neither of you," laughed the driver, "but you manage all right. They're grass snakes, and they move by wiggling their bodies very fast from side to side." "How clever," thought Daisy, and she told Thomas and Percy all about it. Percy shuddered. "I don't like the sound of that," he said. "I hope they don't come near me." They won't, his driver reassured him, smiling. They're harmless, and much more frightened of you than me. I'm not scared, Percy said Daisy scornfully. Surely you're not frightened of a few harmless wriggly things? Percy wasn't comforted. Ugh, he said, just the thought of those snakes makes me shiver. Daisy thought he was being very silly indeed. One afternoon she brought some boxes up from the junction. The men handled them carefully. It's a special delivery, explained Daisy's driver. What's so special about it? Asked Daisy. It's live eels, her driver said. Sort of water snakes. They're for a special menu at the restaurant in the high street. Very carefully the porters stacked the boxes on the platform. Daisy moved back so that the milk van could be coupled onto her. The pile of boxes was now just in front of her, while porters began to load empty milk churns into her van. Suddenly a small boy ran past. He accidentally caught the top of the pile with his coat sleeve, hit the platform and burst open on the rails in front of Daisy. Out cascaded a knot of slivery black eels, which at once tried to wriggle away in all directions. Some of them were underneath Daisy. Eee! She squealed. Help! A porter ran to see what was the matter. He found Daisy pulling a face of such disgust that he had to laugh. Get me out of here! Wailed Daisy. Stop making such a fuss, ordered her driver. They're only eels. They're not going to hurt you. You've blown a fuse anyway, so you'll have to wait to be mended. In no time at all, the eels had been rescued and put into another box. None the worse for their adventure. A porter came to take them well out of harm's way. Daisy couldn't bear to watch. A fitter came and tried to mend her, but she was in such a state of nerves that it was no use. Thomas had to pick up her passengers and take them back to the junction. That night in the shed, Percy and Toby made up lots of what they called wriggly jokes, which Daisy thought was very silly and not funny at all. Never mind, said Toby. Near my old railway there's a place called Ely. Think of that. Daisy shuddered. It was the last thing she wanted to think about. Toby's vintage train. At last Victoria was ready. The Fat Controller came to see her. Edward will take you to Thomas's junction, he said. Then go with Thomas to meet Toby and Henrietta, who you will work with. Victoria's wheels hummed happily on the rails. It's wonderful to be running again, she thought. Edward introduced her to Boko at her own station, and they soon reached Thomas's junction. Thomas and the Fat Controller were waiting for them. Thomas's driver was amazed at the change in Victoria. I hope you feel better, the Fat Controller told her. You certainly look better than you did when we first saw you. I feel wonderful. Thank you, sir, smiled Victoria. Victoria was coupled behind Annie and Clarabel, and they set off up the valley. At the station by the river, an inspector met them. Terence is in trouble, he said. I'll ride in your cab, Thomas, but go carefully until we know what has happened. A little way along the line, Terence's owner was building a barn. The lane to the barn ran along the top of a cutting just outside the tunnel. That afternoon, Terence had been pulling a trailer loaded with stones for the barn when a boulder had fallen into the lane from the verge. Terence swerved towards the edge of the cutting to avoid the boulder, and of course the trailer followed. Suddenly the trailer's wheels hit a muddy patch and slipped sideways towards the railway. The weight of the stone dragged at the trailer further over the edge. Terence tried to hang on, but the trailer broke away and bumped down the steep hill towards the railway. Luckily there was a large bush on the cutting side. The trailer ran into it and stopped, balancing dangerously. The heavy stone tumbled down the slope and landed beside the railway with a crash. Thomas's train is due, gasped Terence. His owner ran to telephone a warning to the station. His call was just in time. With the inspector in his cab, Thomas moved cautiously along the line. By the time they reached the place of the accident, the fireman had managed to fasten the trailer so that it would not move. The inspector made sure that the building stones had not damaged the railway. All right, he told Thomas's driver as he climbed back into the cab. Proceed at caution, please, and drop me at the next signal box so that I can report what has happened. Thomas and the inspector reached the top station safely, and found Toby and Henrietta waiting for them. Victoria and Henrietta liked each other at once, and soon became the best of friends. "There cannot be many railways," announced the Fat Controller, "who can run a complete train of stock as old as Toby, Henrietta and Victoria. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you 3 cheers for Toby's vintage train. I am very proud of all 3 of you, and I know you will be a credit to me." Now Victoria is as happy as can be. She helps Henrietta to take workmen to and from the quarry, and at other times you will see her with Thomas, Annie and Clarabel, running happily along the valley. She knows she is very lucky. "This is much better than being a summer house in an orchard," she sometimes thinks to herself. "It's great to be useful again. I think we can be sure, can't we, that Victoria will be useful for many years to come." Thomas and his friends. Thomas and the Swan. Thomas and Gordon were at the big station, where Gordon had just backed down to take the express. "Hello, Gordon," said a voice. "Remember us?" Gordon was late and not in the mood for guessing games. "Pip?" he ventured carefully. "Or is it Emma?" "It's me," Philippa laughed. "Well done. Emma is at the back today." "Why are you here?" asked Thomas. The question was answered at once as the Fat Controller arrived. "Philippa and Emma," Fat Controller began importantly, "could be very helpful to my railway." "Yes, sir," agreed Gordon, though he wasn't sure why. "Too much time," the Fat Controller went on, "is wasted by changing the engine of the express at the other railway. Our timetable is too slow." Suddenly Gordon realised what the Fat Controller meant. "And if Pip and Emma were the express instead of me pulling, it would mean there wouldn't be a changeover." "Exactly," agreed the Fat Controller. "Well done, Gordon." After that, the Fat Controller often saw Pip and Emma at the big station. "You're doing well," he would say kindly. "I am very pleased that my plan is working." One day Thomas was at the junction when, with a cheerful "Good morning," Pip and Emma hurried by. Moments later, with a rattle and a roar, they were gone. "They're a great success," remarked Thomas's driver, "and Gordon loves it. He says he can now do 2 trips a day instead of 1. A little later, Thomas set off along the branch line, with Annie and Clarabel following cheerfully behind. Today there was an inspector on Thomas's footplate, so the small space was quite crowded. The inspector was assessing Thomas's firemen for possible promotion. They stopped at the station by the river for Thomas to take on water. While they waited, Thomas saw something white on the rails in front. "What's that?" he asked. "Just an old newspaper, I expect," said his driver. "Come on." Just then Thomas saw a white neck uncurl and a yellow beak appear. "Stop!" he called. "It's not a newspaper." Quickly the driver braked and the inspector got down. He went to look and then returned to the cab. "It's a swan," the inspector told Thomas's driver. "It must have flown into the parapet of the bridge by mistake. Can you come and help, please?" Thomas watched anxiously as the 2 men lifted the bird. It tried to flap its wings, but only one of them moved. Very carefully, the inspector and the driver carried the injured swan past Thomas. They placed it gently in a corner of the cab, and the inspector covered it with his coat. "Off we go, Thomas," said his driver. "Be as gentle as you can." The firemen had told the signalman at the river station what had happened, so they had a clear run to the top station. When they got there, the inspector took the swan in his car to a nearby vet. Vet reset the broken wing and kept the bird in his surgery garden until it was strong enough to fly. Then he went with Thomas to the river to let the swan go free. Word of Thomas's rescue spread fast, and soon all the engines had heard about it. Pip and Emma congratulated him when they saw him at the big station, and so did the Fat Controller. Gordon too was very proud. "Just think," said Pippa, "if it had been us at the express, we wouldn't have been able to stop." "And now we can add injured birds to our list of passengers," said Thomas proudly. For bashing. Winter was passing, but there was still 1 or 2 late frosts, which made everything look sugar-coated and sparkling in the spring sunshine. As the months had spread, Pip and Emma had become quite used to being the express and making their daily journey between the big station and London. Each morning Donald and Douglas took it in turns to bring a ballast train from the small railway, and James then pulled the trucks to a place where the line was being mended. One morning Donald was uncoupled and ran ahead into a sliding to let James take his place at the front of the trucks. But a hard frost had made the rails icy. When Donald tried to stop, his wheels locked and they slid on the ice. Before he could say "Fat Controller," he hit the buffers at the end of the siding. The buffers stopped him. That was what they were there for, but they were badly damaged. Donald was lucky. He wasn't hurt at all, just embarrassed. Other engines teased him. "You should go in for skating championships," they said. Even Donald laughed, though he was worried about what the Fat Controller might say. But the Fat Controller only warned him to be more careful. He knew it hadn't really been Donald's fault. The next day men were sent to mend the buffers. At last James's repair on the line was ending. "Tomorrow's train, Douglas, will be the last one for the time being," the Fat Controller told him. Next day, as Douglas drew his loaded trucks to a halt in their siding, James was waiting. "Here you are, James," Douglas said cheerfully. "What are you going to do now this job is finishing?" "Pull some passenger trains, I hope," replied James. "I'm getting tired of doing the same thing all the time." "Never mind," said Douglas. "Today's the last one." His fireman uncoupled the trucks and climbed back into the cab. Then Douglas puffed slowly into the short siding. At the end of the siding, the men who had been mending the buffers were standing to one side. They had pots of paint beside them and had just finished painting the buffer bar bright red. "That looks very smart," thought Douglas. "Much better than it did before. The Fat Controller probably glad that Donald smashed it up." He moved into the siding. His driver put on the brakes. Nothing happened. The driver tried again. Still nothing. "Horrors!" exclaimed Douglas. "I can't stop!" Workmen watched in dismay. Douglas rolled steadily along the line and smashed to splinters the buffers they had just spent 3 days mending. "Och!" exclaimed Douglas, opening his eyes cautiously. "That hurt!" The new buffers had stopped him, but unfortunately Douglas had been moving faster than Donald. He was in a terrible mess. His front was badly bent, and he was smeared with the bright red paint, which hadn't had time to dry. "You silly great engine!" scolded the fireman, waving his paintbrush angrily. It still had red paint in it, and some of the paint flew out and stuck on Douglas's nose. 3 days' work," the foreman said crossly, "and in 3 seconds you come and smash it all to pieces." Douglas's front wheels were off the rails, so James had to come and rescue him. Later, the Fat Controller spoke sternly to Douglas about engines not taking care in sidings, and the red paint was left on Douglas's nose. As a reminder, Gordon's fire service. Pip and Emma were delighted to be able to run fast times to London. Gordon would have to stop for water, but they didn't need to. Gordon couldn't understand why the controllers had taken all the water pipes away. He was even a bit suspicious about it. "Proper engines can't work without water," he kept saying. "It's sabotage, that's what." "Diesel and electric trains don't need water," Pip and Emma tried to explain. "We don't have to make steam like you do." But Gordon wasn't convinced. "Does the other railway have electric trains too?" asked Henry, "like the ones that go past our mountain railway?" "Some are like that," said Emma. "Some trains are pulled by electric engines." That silenced Henry, for a while. Gordon's last train each day stopped at all the stations. He liked this because he didn't have to hurry and get hot and bothered. One evening, however, delays on the other railway made Gordon late. At last he drew into the station where the electric line began. As Gordon stopped, an electric train slid silently off the branch line and stopped at another platform. It caught Gordon's attention as it made no noise and no steam. Beyond the station, a busy road crossed under the railway. Gordon was about to leave when he heard a shout in front of him. A man appeared scrambling up the bank near the bridge. A wisp of smoke rose behind him. The man ran towards the station waving his arms. "Help!" he yelled. "Fire!" Porter ran to telephone for the fire brigade. Gordon's firemen asked permission from the signalman and carefully worked the train forward. They stopped near the bridge. Smoke billowed from a bale of straw that lay on the roadside verge. A tractor and trailer stood nearby. Got the straw off before the rest went up, gasped the tractor driver. Now we must wait for the fire brigade. Tongues of flame curled around the edges of the straw bale and the smoke grew thicker. Can't we do something? Urged Gordon urgently. We certainly can, said his fireman. He grabbed the hosepipe he used to wash the footplate with water from the tender. Then he turned the tap, and when the water was running, he pointed the hosepipe at the burning straw. It wasn't a very strong jet of water, but it was enough. Slowly the flames died down and the tractor driver stamped out the remaining embers. At that moment the fire brigade arrived. Sorry, the tractor driver explained. I'm afraid you'll have a wasted journey. Gordon has put the fire out with water from his tender. The fire chief laughed. Well done, Gordon. A good job you were standing by. Gordon was very proud. And prouder still when the fire chief recommended him for the Queen's Fire Service Medal. The Fat Controller arranged a special presentation at the big station. Electric trains may be able to run fast with no noise, said Gordon, but we steam engines have our uses too. Centenary. One day in early summer, the Fat Controller called a meeting of the engines. You have all heard, he announced, of the Thin Clergyman. Isn't he the one who wrote stories about us? Ventured Thomas. Well done, Thomas, agreed the Fat Controller. Sadly, he has now died, but this year it is 100 years since he was born. He paused. To mark this auspicious occasion, he went on. What's suspicious? Squeaked Percy, and then hoped the Fat Controller hadn't heard him. But he had. Auspicious, Percy, means important, explained the Fat Controller. To mark this, important occasion, I have arranged for a bust of the Thin Clergyman to be unveiled here in a few weeks. Your duties will be adjusted so that you can all attend. There will be a very special visitor there to unveil the bust. Some time later, the Fat Controller spoke to James. I have an important job for you, he said. The crate with the Thin Clergyman statue has arrived at the other railway. I want you to fetch it, please. James puffed off proudly. Felt even prouder when he began the journey back to the big station, with the crate safely on a truck. But just as James had passed through Henry's tunnel, there was a rumble and an enormous crash. James's driver looked back in alarm. Part of the tunnel had collapsed behind them. The railway to the outside world was completely cut off. James stopped at the next signal box, and his driver told the signalman what had happened. Later, the Fat Controller sent Donald, Douglas and Henry to help repair the tunnel. But until it was mended, no trains could reach the other railway from the island of Sodor. And no engines can get onto the island either, pointed out Gordon. Pip and Emma are stuck on the other side of the tunnel, and they are supposed to bring the important visitors. On Thomas's branch line, the engines were worried too. We've all got jobs to do on the day, said Thomas, but what if no one can get here? Don't worry, soothed his driver. Bertie and his friends are meeting all the trains on the other railway and bringing the passengers over. Fat Controller gave orders to carry on as usual, but Gordon's train to the other railway had to stop at the workstation. Bertie brought in passengers, but Gordon complained that it wasn't the same. Meanwhile, Percy had a smaller problem. Why is everyone bothered about something that's broken? He asked Toby one day. Toby was puzzled. Broken? He asked. What do you mean, broken? Well, explained Percy, the Fat Controller said it was bust. What's bust? The Thin Clergyman. Poor man, said Percy sadly. Thomas, listening nearby, laughed. The Thin Clergyman isn't broken, he chuckled. A bust is a sort of statue, just the head and shoulders of the person. Percy cheered up at once. Oh, he said, that's all right then. I just hope that everybody can get to see it, put in Toby. A few days later, the Fat Controller announced that the tunnel had been mended. The inspectors worked through the night on their safety checks, and the first train allowed through was Pip and Emma. At the big station, the bust of the Thin Clergyman beneath a silk cover was ready. The engines waited anxiously. At last, Pip and Emma arrived, and the first person off the train was a prince. The Fat Controller greeted him, and after a short speech, the prince pulled a cord. The silk cover fell to the ground, revealing a perfect likeness of the thin clergyman. "My parents," said the prince, "read stories about your railway to me as a child. There will never be anything like it anywhere." The end.